Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this lecture. Ken Power being presented by the Center for Mind, Brain, and Culture. So I'm going to say a word or two about the center first to get us started. My name is Dietrich, Stout. In case you don't know me, I direct the center. It's a center in the college that's supposed to support interdisciplinarity, basically, across anything intersecting with mind, brain, and culture. So as we were just talking about, it's an extraordinarily broad remit. We try to involve people from across the social, behavioral, natural sciences, and the humanities and the arts. So we take interdisciplinary very seriously, and you can see that reflected in our leadership, our advisory committee. Mainly what we do is we host lectures like this one, smaller discussion lunches. Sometimes we run symposia, workshops. In recent years, we've also been having reading groups, or interest groups. So if you have something that you're interested in talking about with other members of our community, let us know, and we can help support that as well. I want to direct your attention to our website. Please visit our website. One of the things that you'll find there is our podcast library, an increasingly antiquated term for this. But anyway, we've been recording, like this will be recorded today, and eventually will make its way up there. It's searchable. So we're talking about years of cool lectures that you can use for your own interest or for teaching or whatever. So go ahead and please check that out. And this is just an example of some of the things that we're doing this semester. I'll mention later on this week, we have Chris Krapenia, who studies theory of mind in non-human primates and apes. So again, you can see we do a lot of different kinds of things. We do run these workshops that I mentioned. This spring, we're going to have one, the cognitive science of compassion. So we're tying into this broader theme, the year of compassion here at Emory. If you are a graduate student or you have graduate students, we offer a certificate program. Okay, so this is a program for graduate students to get a qualification, a certificate. There's a core course, a couple basically reading groups that they participate in. You choose a few courses outside of your home department, and you get to participate with a cohort of like-minded students who are interested in interdisciplinary issues. You also become eligible for some very small grants and that kind of thing from the center. So our current certificate program has a wide range of people, anthropology, neuroscience, philosophy, English, business. So we really are open to any unit at Emory. We also are going to be sending out a call probably tomorrow for our undergraduate fellows. So have a look for that. These are final year undergraduates who are doing some kind of research, often an honors project. And they also participate in the Life at Center. We have regular discussion group meetings, and they come to events like this. And so keep an eye out for that call, if you might be interested. And finally, if you found out about this in any other way than receiving an email from us, please use this QR code to become an affiliate, and you'll get on our mailing list. Now, because this is an interdisciplinary center, we cover so much, I can't keep up with everything that's interesting. So we lean very heavily on our constituents, our affiliates, to come to us and tell us what they're interested in. And so today's lecture was actually because Stephan Hamann came to me and said, hey, can you maybe invite a speaker that I'm interested in? And so I'm going to let Stephan introduce the lecture. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
My pleasure. That's the one.
There we go. All right. There's this, and we'll
figure it out.
Go to, will I echo here? So far, so good. Okay, so I will keep this short because I really like you. I want to know what he's going to be talking about. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today, Ken Power. He's a cognitive neuroscience scientist from Northwestern University, and his work has had a major impact on what we understand about memory, sleep, and dreaming. He's a professor of psychology and holds the James Padilla Chair, if I pronounced that correctly, in Arts and Sciences. He grew up in Los Angeles, and he did his undergraduate work at UCLA And then he received his PhD in neuroscience from UC San Diego, where he trained with Larry Squire, who incidentally was also my postdoctoral advisor. So a little connection there. And also with Steve Hilliard, very well-known researcher. He went on to do postdoctoral work at Berkeley, Yale, and the University of Manchester. Dr. Powler's research has shaped how we think about memory in several important ways, from the experience of conscious remembering to the ways memory can influence our behavior even when we're not aware of it. His work with people with memory disorders has helped highlight the links between memory problems and poor sleep. More recently, his lab has been especially influential in developing targeted memory reactivation, or TMR, showing how memory processing during sleep can strengthen learning. His current research looks at how sleep contributes not only to memory, but also to creativity and psychological well-being. Ken has also collaborated with Tibetan monastic scholars and broader Buddhism and science initiatives, including the Emory Tibet Science Initiative, using sleep and dreaming research to build dialogue between cognitive neuroscience and Tibetan contemplative traditions. On a lighter note, you might not know this, but in his spare time, Ken plays keyboards with the famous or infamous rock group called Pavlov's Dogs, which you can look up on YouTube after his talk. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ken Powler.
I guess I had this. So thank you, Stephan. It's really great to be here. Emory is such a powerhouse in so many ways, and there's so many departments where I know somebody or getting to know people. So it's great to meet people today and to be here. And there's one in particular thing about Emory that gives me such great pleasure. So I'm going to start out with that. I've been very fortunate to be involved with the Emory Tibet Science Initiative that Stephan mentions, and I'm just really grateful that I've had that opportunity. It's been so meaningful. My wife and I first started in visiting a place called the Drepung Losling Meditation and Science Center in India, and it's so wonderful to be there, and it was such an opportunity for us. Here we are featured together with Lobsang Negi, who's really got this whole center going, and the center has, as you know, multiple components: that social and ethical and emotional learning. I'm such a big fan of that for school children. It's really a wonderful program for the world. And cognitive-based compassion training, this other component, also a big fan. But the program I've been involved in is focused on classroom teaching. So I think over like the past 20 years, it developed to do teaching of science for monastic scholars, as shown here. And we were involved in that. We got to visit in 2018 and 2019. And then there was a transition from classroom teaching to more research-focused teaching. And that's been really wonderful to be involved with. Let's see now. We've been able to go back to India a couple times for that program. And that's, I'm slipping here. That's run by Robin Nussluck, who's one of my colleagues at Northwestern. And also, oh God, I'm just struggling with its turn. And Nicole is the from biology is the other brain master behind this incredible program that she and Robin put together for training the monks in actually doing science. And then that also involved the Northwestern Neuroscience internship program, where groups of monks, 3 or 4 at a time, and sometimes a nun, would come to Northwestern and spend 2 months in my lab and my wife's lab, Martha Grabowecki, and Robin Nussluck's lab, and learn about the research that we do, and then learning together as we do with our PhD students and postdocs, working in a collaborative way to actually complete projects from start to finish, and in that way be trained, so now they can go on and do whatever research they want to do with those skills. So it's been wonderful to do that. So there's a picture of some of the monks in my lab learning how to do this methods we use to record the sleep physiology, and that was really wonderful. We also, of course, wanted them to engage in specific projects. So we decided that one of the fun topics to investigate involves dreaming, lucid dreaming, and eventually dream control. One of the projects we worked on in the first year with some of the monks that visited and the nun was involving this contemplative practice that is thought to enhance compassion, and it involves visualizing a person or a being who has incredible amounts of compassion, in that way sort of feeling what is it like to be as compassionate as humanly imaginable to enhance one's own compassion. And so we asked, can we have someone engage in that kind of visualization in their dreams? And in the study, which is really a group project including people like Gabriela Torres-Plata, shown here, and other people in my lab, as well as the monastic scholars. And just last week, on Monday, we published our first paper describing that work with the title Inducing Lucid Dreaming, based on a contemplative practice of compassion, which is visualizing this Tibetan deity, Chenrisi. And you can see the names of the monastic scholars who worked on that. This is Cho Young, that's how I know her, but she has another name that she goes by. And so it's sort of wonderful to have this out there in the literature. This QR code gets to the paper if you want to look at it. It's probably, maybe it's the only scientific paper where this is figure one. So unusual, but it's wonderful to think about that. And we just showed, oh, it's possible to have one person have a lucid dream that includes some features of the visualization that they practiced before they went to sleep, which is not really a novel finding, but now it's sort of starting the road to say, okay, can we study things like that happen in dreams? How do we use the methods? And my talk is going to go through how we develop those methods, and then asking questions, which is yet to be asked really, is, well, how does this enhance compassion together with all the other things that can do that? Actually, this kind of visualization is part of a bigger compendium of practices called Tibetan Dream Yoga. And this is a contemplative practice, unlike the wide variety of contemplative practices that are around. This one's engaged while you're sleeping, and it sort of is a companion to things you do while you're awake. But it means some specific exercises, activities that are engaged by the experts using their dreams, exploring their dreams to yield spiritual insights. So it's not yoga poses, it's a mental exercise of a whole set of practices that have been documented in the Tibetan-Buddhist literature over many hundreds of years. So a lot of written about it, about how it's done, about the benefits of doing it. And so as good scientists, we want to pay attention to the literature when we're studying lucid dreaming. It turns out there's a long literature on this very topic that we're trying to understand and become familiar with. And that's part of the broader Buddhism science dialogue that is so rich from both directions, because it's a two-way interchange of information that I think is really important and very, very needed. So in our studies of dream yoga, one of our questions was, well, what happens during sleep in these advanced practitioners when they have these activities in their dreams, and how can we investigate that? And Gabriela is first authoring this first study, which we've written up, not yet published, but there's a paper that's available describing this intentional lucid dreaming with a transformative learning agenda. And that's the dream yoga practice that we're now looking at in a small group of 6 experts, as well as asking to what extent can other people who don't have a meditation practice, to what extent can they also make use of some of the strategies that are used in the tradition. And so we want to know things like, how do these practices produce benefits? And looking at further, can we help anyone gain more from dreaming and from sleep? So now I'm going to transition into how do we study sleep and dreaming and memory, and then eventually come back to studies of dreaming and how that works. A little echo there, cut that down. So let's get started with that. One of the duties of us doing science is to also explain to the public why it's important, and that's become profoundly important, obvious now that we need to do more of that. And I had the advantage, the opportunity to do that once when I wrote this article that appeared in Scientific American, and it was about how we process memories during sleep. And if you've written for a Scientific American, you might know the editors have a pretty big role there, and they wanted this title, Sleep Learning. And we didn't want, my co-author and I didn't really want that title, because sleep learning sounds like learning while you sleep, learning new stuff, picking up, a new language without even putting in any effort. And that's not quite the meaning, but I've kind of come to understand sleep learning in a different way now. We can think of learning starts when you're awake, but it doesn't stop then. It's got to continue, because we can't store memories just instantaneously the way you put something in a laptop and it stores that information. We need to work with it more to have solid memories. We need to do a further processing. And some of that offline work is happening during sleep. So that's what we really mean by sleep learning. Although the learning new information is also interesting and can be studied as well. But for the most part, we're studying what happens during sleep that benefits our learning that we do during the day. So we'll be talking about that. I wrote another paper about it, and I got to decide on the title. So I instead went with this title. This is for a journal that you should check out if you have any kids, or this journal called Frontiers for Young Minds. It's open access for kids to learn more about science. And if you can explain your own work to kids, you should write an article for this journal. And so to what extent are house elves cleaning your brain while you're asleep? They're organizing memories. Something's happening in there that you can tell a story about. And let me dive into that and see if it makes sense to you. How do we, without even trying, have memory processing happening during sleep, and how does that help us? So, and one other note about educating the public: it's nice when your work gets covered in a way that helps people understand how taxpayer dollars are well spent on certain research that, of course, helps with diseases, helps in understanding that's going to have relevance later. And I published a paper that in February last month got covered in a bunch of places, including The Economist. And it's an idea that solving problems benefits from processing during sleep as well. And I'm going to tie that in. I guess it was a short 2-paragraph article in The Economist. I don't expect you to read it because I'm going to move ahead in a moment. But it's just an important part of how can we get science out to the public and convince more people that we're not wasting taxpayer dollars by doing this stuff. So more of that should be done, and good to think about. So let me switch now to a question for you all. How did you sleep last night? Raise your hand if you had a really good night's sleep, slept well. Uh-oh. Not that many. How many didn't sleep very well? Oh, too bad. So this is important. It's a big chunk of our lives. But if you answered this question already, I guess you assume you understand what does it mean to sleep well? What is that about? Perhaps you were thinking, well, I felt good when I woke up. So there you are. Must have had good sleep. But maybe that's not the whole story. There are a lot of benefits we get from sleep. And so maybe sleeping well should really be redefined a little bit. It's certainly not the number of hours. I mean, not everyone needs 7 hours or 8 hours. It matters more what you're doing in those hours. What is your brain doing? What's the rest of your body doing that's yielding these benefits? So we have to understand the benefits better and see, maybe really good sleep would be getting all the benefits and maxing out on everything. So we need to understand what those benefits are. I'm going to list some. What's the first one? It's probably not being sleepy. So we sleep so we're not going to be sleepy. That's almost sounds circular, but that's kind of part of the problem, or part of what you solve when you wake up feeling well rested. You don't feel sleepy during the day, even in the afternoon in a dark room watching slides and sitting still. That can be hard if you didn't get good sleep. Though you could have coffee. There are a lot of benefits for the body and for physiology that I don't want to take the time to go into, but lots of ways in sleep is helpful. I'm going to focus on the cognitive ones here: memory, creativity, and psychological well-being. So note that if you don't get good sleep, but just think, I just have a couple coffees and then I'm great, I don't really need good sleep, I just need that coffee. Well, you might have less sleepiness, but you're going to not necessarily get all these other benefits. So coffee isn't necessarily the solution here. We need to understand, how do these benefits come about, and then think more about, well, so how important is sleep? And, you don't always get good sleep, but maybe it's because you have, 2 jobs, you have a lot of things you need to get done that you can't get done in the day. So something has to go, but at what price is it when you do that? Or, maybe it's not even possible to get more sleep, and we should understand, okay, if you're doing shift work, what are the consequences of that? And understand that better, and maybe have some answers to it. Now, if you have really good sleep, it might seem like your brain is just off. Nothing going on. You wake up and your brain has just had a good rest. But, as we all know, your brain isn't turned off. It's continuing to work all night, even though you may not be aware of it. You may just remember a dream or two. But that's just a little small part of what your brain is doing. So it's kind of a little mystery. If your brain is doing all this overnight work every night, how come we're oblivious to it? And from my point of view as a memory researcher, like Stephan and I think your brain is in a particular memory state overnight that's about working with all the memories you've acquired. And that brain state doesn't seem really conducive to acquiring new information. And so we're not tuned up to acquire new information until we wake up. And at that point, you can like think about the dream that was just going through your mind and then be able to store it later. So we have to kind of work hard to answer this question better. And I suppose the answer I just gave you is saying, well, we have sleep amnesia, a special type of amnesia that we all suffer from because of the way our brain is working at night and not allowing us to remember all that work that was done, or even most of our dreams. That most people don't remember their dreams, but you're still having dreams. Okay, so the one way to illustrate that is to think about all the memories you acquire. So it's a little after 4 o'clock. You've done a lot of things today. I bet right now, or let's say at the end of the night today, you could write down all the things you remember from the day. Maybe even some of my talk, but also the people you talked to, what you did during the day. So at the end of any given day, you've got lots of perfectly viable memories. And so you can think about today at the end of the day, I'm going to be able to remember. I could fill pages of stuff with what happened today. But then take, 2 weeks ago, how much can you write about what happened that day? Not very much. So as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to recall memories. Something's fading over time. And our question for memory research then is, well, what determines which memories are going to survive? Because we do have memories that survive 2 weeks, actually a lifetime. What is it about those memories that get so changed so that you can store them well? And this has, been a challenging problem for memory research. But if I had a one-word answer, I'd say, well, it's practice. The things we remember are the things that we rehearse multiple times. Certainly, if you're an actor learning lines, you have to rehearse those lines. If you just meet a person and hear their name, then you have to remember the name. You have to rehearse that name again and again. And we do that rehearsal, but we do it not just when we're intending to do it, but we also do it unconsciously and unintentionally. And this is something we might do. Our brain is taking care of it for us during periods of rest and during periods of sleep. And so it's now memory researchers are coming online with saying, oh, we need to study that, not just the input and the output of memory, but what happens in between. And consolidation, this idea that memories are being processed further, is an old idea, but now we have more ideas about, or more ways to study what's happening in the physiology of that process. So here's one way to think about it, that you form memories, and then if you reactivate them later, they can go through this process called consolidation, where the information that you have acquired gets better connected with all the other things you know. And these connections are really important. It's not just an isolated memory. You might think it's isolated because sometimes it seems like you just reach over and grab a memory off a shelf in your head, or a little being in your head grabs it off a shelf and then can just play that memory from some earlier time in your life. That's illustrated in this cartoon movie of being able to just grab memories and play them as if they're memory orbs in your brain. But there aren't memory orbs in your brain. Memories aren't really isolated in that sense. They're all intermixed. We have separate memories, but the connections between memories is fundamental to how we store them effectively. That's in fact what makes them retrievable, is being connected with many other memories. So we have to form these connections and in fact transform what's stored, sometimes drop some of the details that aren't important and remember the important facts of the matter. Other times remember a whole lot of details. So these are the processes of consolidation that can lead to enduring memories. This is a standard idea of consolidation in memory research, but now we're adding, well, this process of reactivation and consolidation can happen both when you're awake and when you're asleep. Both when you know it's happening and other times where you don't know it's happening, and we can study how that works and make use of that information. That's the newer idea about consolidation. Okay, so the way we studied that was in my lab to look at trying to change what happens overnight. So not just observing what's happening with memory processing, but actually alter it a little bit. And we did that in a way that if I had been a sleep researcher, I probably wouldn't have designed that experiment, but I was just new into getting this during sleep. And I didn't know what sleep researchers thought they knew, which is that auditory processing and actually every modality except olfaction is cut off during sleep. And you're not processing information, you're not acting in the world, you're oblivious to things that are happening, unless it's really loud, and of course your alarm clock wakes you up. But otherwise, the information not getting in. Well, not going along with that orthodox view, we ran this study in 2009 with a method that Stephan mentioned called targeted memory activation. And here's how it works. A person learns something while they're awake. In this case, the location of 50 objects. Each object's on the screen in a random location. And through many trials, they learn pretty precisely where each object goes. And the special thing about each object is each object came with a sound, the sound that naturally went with it. So the cat came along with a meow sound. They didn't have to learn that, that's obvious. They just had to learn that exact location. Then we had 50 learned items, and we separated them randomly into 2 groups of 25. And 25 of the sounds were then presented softly when people were taking an afternoon nap and when they were in slow wave sleep. And there was some prior literature saying slow wave sleep is the key time where this memory processing could happen. That was kind of a idea that went against earlier ideas that were focusing on REM sleep. And we can come back to that. But at this point, it seemed like slow wave sleep was the key time. We then woke people up. They had to do the memory test and say exactly where each object went. And they were better for the objects we had selected to reactivate during sleep than the ones we hadn't. So that's how we know it worked. The sounds must have gotten in, and the people didn't remember meow better. The meow must have reactivated the object in its location, and there was less forgetting for those objects compared to the matched ones. They were the same before sleep, but afterwards, accuracy was better for the items that had been selected to be presented during sleep. So we can conclude then, memory activation during sleep changes memory storage, and you wake up with different set of memory capabilities because of what happens during sleep. And we then would speculate, and this happens all the time when you sleep, and we're able to modify it and then understand it better by looking at the neurophysiology and seeing those neurophysiological markers. They're there when we don't present sounds too. So you're activating memories every night. I suppose if you leave the TV on and it's playing commercials, maybe you're reactivating those memories too. Be careful about that. But even if you're sleeping in a perfectly silent room, some memories are going to be reactivated, and we can ask, well, which ones are the ones that come up? That's part of the question we're trying to figure out. How does this memory reactivation work, and how can we understand that and make use of it in various contexts? So this first paper in Science, maybe you shouldn't believe one paper. I don't think so. It could have been a fluke, but now I can say, no, it's actually quite replicated. We did a meta-analysis. Shefsheng Hu, working with me, showed this study where, by 2020, there are many, many more studies using the same TMR method, and the effects seem replicable and apply for, in fact, many types of memory, not just the spatial memory. So we're learning, of course, actually, one other point about that is it's still important to replicate. And so in Germany, there's a grant to fund a massive replication of this very same study. So Gordonfeld has 13 different labs scattered around the world, and they're all going to run the same study and aggregate the data. So the same study, instead of like 12 subjects, will be now a few hundred subjects, and we'll hopefully replicate the result and then learn more about it and the individual differences in people and lots of other factors that you can analyze better if you have lots and lots of data. We now know there's some factors that make this not work so well. So it's not like it works automatically every time. Not every memory test is the same, so you have to have a nice sensitive measure of memory to see small effects like this spatial location test. We measure by the pixel how accurate they are. And also, if the sounds are too loud, they disrupt sleep. So if you want to try this at home, it's a little dangerous because if the sounds are too loud, not only do they mess up your sleep, but they also mess up the memory, it turns out. And a grad student, Nathan Whitmore, did a few studies that I won't go into, but they basically showed that sounds that are too loud don't help memory. They actually hurt memory for those specific items that are presented. So an important part of the procedure is to understand how do we do this, and we do this real carefully in the lab. We present the sounds very softly and bring them up and watch the EEG. We can tell if there's an arousal, and then we know, oh, we shouldn't present them that loud and back off a bit. So we can do that well. We're working now on, with some methods Nathan also worked on, to do the same experiments in the home with wearable technology. And so it's possible to do the same kinds of things and study not just a single nap like here, but over many nights, maybe you could really accrue bigger memory benefits, because this wasn't a huge memory benefit, but nevertheless reliable and maybe accruing over time, since we're doing this over time every time we sleep. Okay, another example of a very different type of memory is a motor skill memory. In this case, does anyone know the game Guitar Hero? So there are 4 buttons. You have to press the 4 buttons, and these balls move up. And when they get to the white circle, you have to press the right button at exactly the right time, and then you hear this wonderful melody. And so people learned to play a couple melodies, and they got better at the 2 they practiced here compared to one they didn't get to practice. And then we randomly selected 1 melody to play while they're sleeping. And again, their memory performance isn't, do I recognize this melody? But it's visual motor. Can I press the button at exactly the right time to get that melody to play? And the one we presented during sleep was performed more accurately than the one we didn't present. And in fact, both were better. There seems to be a general benefit of sleep for motor performance, but here we could bias it, so show that the memory processing during sleep seemed to be reactivating the information that you learned while you were learning the task when you were awake. This is studied by James Antoni when he was in my lab, and he also showed that we can measure some neural correlates of that. And just briefly, sleep spindles are one of the neural correlates. They've been described in sleep forever, but with unclear theories about what they actually meant. And now, in the last 10 years or so, it's become very clear that they seem to reflect some memory processing, some cortical and thalamic interactions that can reflect specific memory processing. In this case, over contralateral cortex, there was a correlation between how much sleep spindle activity there was and how big this memory benefit was. So one of many hints that are now out there in the literature to link things with spindles. Now, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about the physiology. So there's a whole lot more to say about sleep spindles, these 11 to 16 hertz phenomena. And one of the interesting things is it's even stronger in some people with an incredibly good memory. So that's sort of an interesting finding that's being developed. But let me jump ahead to one other TMR study that was done by Eitan Shekfman, who was a postdoc with me now at UC Davis. And he presented stimuli that were just like the cat stimuli. You had to learn the locations of objects, but he changed it so that sometimes there was a sound like a meow and 6 different cats in 6 different locations. And he asked, when you do that with 6 as opposed to 1, do you get like 1/6 of the benefit? Like the memory activation, does it have to make a choice about which cat to reactivate or give a little benefit to each one? And his result was that actually, no, each one was reactivating just as well. So you can get 6 for the price of 1. It seems that memory activation is happening kind of in parallel over different memories. And that's an interesting finding that suggests to me that this is unconscious memory activation. It's not a single track kind of working memory thing, but it can be done many ways at once. And he looked at the physiology as well. So you're looking at a time frequency plot. 0 is when the sound was presented. And over the next few seconds, there's change in brain physiology that we can measure. This red spot down here in the lower band is slow wave activity, 0.5 to 4 hertz. And then at about 1 second, there was an increase in the spindle range. And so this seems to be a correlate of that memory processing that was in fact bigger when there were 6 different things associated with that sound compared to 1 or 2. So we have a handle on some of the activity. In fact, other studies I won't go into have, for many labs, have shown that there's a linkage between the spindles and the slow waves. Actually, they're part of the same process. And if the spindles are happening at the right phase of slow waves, that's when you get the best effect. That's what's working best in people with good memory and younger people in particular. Okay, so we think there's a whole set of different oscillations that are linked with this process that we can study. They include the slow waves and spindles that I mentioned, as well as activity in the hippocampus, the sharp wave ripple phenomenon that's measured. And it in fact give us indication of the hippocampus and the cortex working together and reactivating the memory and changing memory storage as a result. Interesting ways to study this phenomenon with my great sleep researcher colleague, Phil Z. We've looked at some of those. You can use electricity or sensory rhythms in training these activities and try to make spindles or slow waves more prominent and maybe make memory a little better as a result. So this is kind of an important way we can modify sleep. And I'm going to talk about using TMR to modify sleep, but we also have these entrainment methods that also can add together and help move sleep in different ways as we begin to understand the physiology better. But putting the physiology aside then, and we looked at intracranial results as well, we can say, okay, what do we do with that activity? How is memory organizing helpful for us during sleep? Because although I'm a memory researcher, and everything's about memory, there's kind of more to it than just memory processing. So because you're doing this memory organizing, you're taking the information you acquired that day and bringing it up again and trying to integrate it with other things you know. And that is also kind of the basis of creativity. It's like looking for new connections, taking things you know and putting them together in new ways. So we've done some studies looking at how creativity can benefit from this memory processing overnight that we do. A second area is psychological well-being. So we think, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, that the type of memories you bring up, usually not just spatial memories, but what's happened to you, that can influence how you wake up, if you wake up on the right side of the bed. So it's not, it's not just 7 hours of sleep, it's not just the physiology, but it's also, and what memories do you reactivate while you're sleeping, and how does that help you or not help you? And thirdly, I'll talk about this idea of transformation, which gets back to that thing I was talking before, dream yoga, and how you can use your sleep in ways that are more strategic, that aren't just what happens normally, but you can take some power and change things how happen. And so we're using this TMR method in various ways to try to influence memory processing and see what are the benefits that are potentially there, not just for memory, which is important, but for other things as well. So let's look into a little of that. This is the creativity experiment done by Kristen Sanders, who was a grad student at the time with Mark Beeman, who studies creativity and problem solving. So they study that in many different ways. And one of the ways is to give people problems, little puzzles to solve. So I've got two puzzles. One of them is try to find a word or phrase that relates to HIJKLMNO. You have to solve that. That's all you get. Anyone know the answer? There's a cute answer there. Okay, well, think about that unconsciously for a minute. The second one is those little circles have a triangle facing up. Can you make it into a triangle facing down by moving just 3 of the circles? I think I can give you the answer to that one. It's that. And the first one, anyone have that now? HIJKLMNO? No? Okay. Should I tell you the answer, or should I wait later and see if you get it by then? I'll wait later. Okay, so this is the paper. It's got, the experiment had 4 components. You learn things. In this case, it's learning a puzzle, but not solving it. And then you are tested on it. You sleep with TMR, and you go to sleep later. So the first part had a whole set of puzzles. Some are like this. Some are with matchsticks. Move a few matchsticks and make something else. You get 2 minutes for the puzzle, and Kristen was looking for puzzles that weren't solved. So if you solve it, we move on and give you another one until you have 6 unsolved puzzles. And then people went home with a device that measured EEG at the forehead. And over 2 nights, it presented the soundtrack of 3 of the puzzles. So randomly selecting half of the puzzles, just like on our other experiments, playing the soundtrack and asking, how does that influence your ability to come up with the answer? And so, there were 6, each night, 6 unsolved puzzles. When you go to bed, each one had a musical soundtrack that went with it when you were trying to solve it. So you learned which song went with which puzzle. And then when you get the song, you know which puzzle it went. And maybe your mind during sleep also knows that and thinks about it. So they wake up and they get 4 minutes for each puzzle. And their results is shown here. Their solving ability is like 20% if we didn't play the music track, and up to over 30% if we did. So it's not that they woke up with the answer, but they were more likely to get the answer during that 4 minutes. So some restructuring of the information must have happened to allow them to, not thinking about it the same way anymore, but think about it in a new way. Abandon the old track. Anyone have the answer? Okay, it's H2O, the symbol for water. H2O, T0. No one's nodding in agreement. It's not a joke, it's H2O, because H2O, yeah, okay. Anyway, there this is just one example. They have dozens of puzzles like that. And this was a cool result. But Kristen presented the sounds in slow wave sleep. We don't know if this restructuring happened in slow wave sleep or in their dreams. So another student, Karen Conkley, set out to study this during REM sleep instead. And to tell you about her studies, first I need to tell you more about dreaming and lucid dreaming in particular. So does anyone have lucid dreams once in a while? A lucid dream is when you're dreaming and you know that you're dreaming at that moment while you're still asleep. A non-lucid dream is when you wake up and realize, oh, all that stuff that just happened, that crazy stuff that was bizarre, that was all a dream. And you don't realize it when you're in the dream. That seems the normal case. But you can realize it and then know you're dreaming. And then, in fact, engage some deliberative strategies that you plan to do or that you decide to do on the moment and have the dream go the way you want it to go, even in some cases. Okay, so that's hard to study. It's been studied. Stephen LaBerge and others have studied it for, since the 70s, but it doesn't happen very often, hard to study. We wanted to use our TMR method to make it happen more often. We call it targeted lucidity reactivation. And we want to not just have people wake up and say, yeah, I had a lucid dream. We want to verify it a little bit more strategically. Not that we don't believe people, but we need more than that. And so this is what we get more than that. We can present a sound that's related to some pre-sleep learning. And the pre-sleep learning is you get a particular sound like a violin or some beeps. And every time you get it, you're told, reactivate a lucid mindset. Actually, you're told what that means. It means, be mindful about your current experience. You can do that right now and think, do I think I'm dreaming right now or am I awake? And just analyze that carefully. And so it's basically conditioning or habit learning. You get an idea, well, when I get that sound, I think about my experience carefully. So linking that with a sound, and this was, Michelle Carr probably published the first paper to show this method, and we used it in 2021 as well. We present a sound that reminds them to think about their experience, and then at a later moment, they're told, if you realize you're dreaming, give us a signal by moving your eyes left and right twice. And that's what this signal is, a left, right, twice. Now, when you're in REM sleep, your eyes are moving. That's why we call it REM. But in your dream body, you can move your eyes. And when you do that, your actual eyes are moving. So that's why we see this signal. You can run in your dream too, and we don't see anything because you're paralyzed. But your eyes aren't paralyzed, your respiration's working. So we have an opportunity to communicate. A couple of investigators in the 70s described that. So we call this verifying a dream, a lucid dream, or signal verified lucid dream. So that was one step in the process. Then we went further from that in a study that Karen Conkley first authored and then had collaborators from different groups who had actually done kind of the same experiment independently without knowing about the others. We did the experiment. We didn't know anyone had done this ever before. And it turns out that Chris Appel in Germany had in fact done it in his master's thesis. It never got published. So we decided to cooperate and write the paper together. Here's the phenomenon. You can see on the left here a bit of wake EEG, a polysomnography, the eyes, the chin muscle, and then in the red box a period of REM where you can see there's a lot less muscle activity, and that's the muscle atonia that tells us it's REM sleep, as well as the other signals and the sort of timing of it all. And this participant was told, when you realize you're dreaming, do a left, right, left, right, left, right. And that's what we see here. He's basically telling us from the dream, I'm having a lucid dream right now. And he kind of knows, okay, I'm in some dream world, but I'm also sleeping in the sleep lab. And Karen's out there and I'm going to signal her like we planned. He makes the signal. And then Karen hits a computer button that is going to present a math problem. And the dreamer knew, okay, I'm going to get a math problem and I'm going to answer it with eye movements. I don't know which problem I'm going to get. Karen didn't know either, but the computer presented 8 minus 6. And then at this time, he heard the question and computed the answer. Actually, we didn't know if he heard it correctly. We thought REM might distort everything. But he actually heard the answer, and we know that this, although this didn't work every time, it worked on a small fraction. But when it worked, the answers were almost always correct. So people are hearing the question, doing mental math, expressing the answer, and he answered another question here with another 2 answers. So in these various groups, including one from Russia, who dropped out halfway through our publication for unknown reasons, the several labs verified this. It is possible to have two-way communication during REM sleep, and that's schematized in this picture here with Karen recording the activity and issuing a question, getting the answer, all the while the sleeper is in some other dream world, imagining something else, but getting the signal somehow, hearing that voice, from the ceiling or from a car radio in one case. So that's possible. So then we can record signals with eye movements. Our collaborators in Paris use muscle twitches of the facial muscles, so you can't move your face, but the muscles will twitch when you try to move it, so little twitches. And one of our favorite methods now is using sniffs. So if you go sniff, sniff, you're going to sniff during your sleep, and we can record that with a nasal cannula and see a nice sniff signal. So that equips us now to ask, what are dreamers experiencing in their dreams at that moment, when we can look at the physiology and see what the brain is doing and try to understand dreaming a little better. Lots of questions to ask. I have a list here. What happens if you close your eyes in a dream? I'll show you that in a moment. How about problem solving, which we got to? What's the role in memory storage of REM sleep? And what are the other benefits that we can accrue from here? So here's one of the examples. This is published last year, showing Karen wanted to see, can we infiltrate the dream and have them think of something that happened before they went to sleep? And so in this case, she thought, word lists are kind of boring. Objects on a screen spatially, that's not so interesting. Let's do some interesting things. So she had people do two tasks, a harmonica task and a bubble task, and then asked, do they dream about these two tasks when they're asleep, and can we bias them to dream about one we select more than the other, which she did. I can tell you, and the task had musical tracks. I guess I should tell you about the task. So they blew bubbles through their nostrils, and they played the harmonica by inhaling through their nostrils, because we wanted to see, can we see respiratory activity during the dream, which we in fact didn't. So sorry that didn't work, but they did the two tasks that were kind of crazy with two different experimenters in two different rooms, and the dreams were then analyzed, and analysts who read the dream reports didn't know which task got cued, but so they couldn't bias it in that way. They could, be lenient. Oh, it seems a little bit like blowing bubbles, and it's a tough kind of literary analysis sort of thing to analyze dream reports. But at least there's no bias here, so we can show that there was more dream information related to the cued tasks than the uncued tasks. So our cues got in; they had an influence, and even the next few days, there was an additional influence of our cueing during sleep. Now, the next experiment Karen did was to ask, what happens when you close your eyes? And we asked this because when you close your eyes in wake, you get big alpha activity. And so we saw big alpha response, and we asked, do you get that same response when you close your dream eyes? And so people did a sniff, double sniff for eyes closed, triple sniff for I'm not seeing anything, a single sniff for eyes open, and a four sniff for yes, I'm seeing stuff. Sometimes they close their eyes and said, I'm still seeing stuff, because that doesn't happen when you're awake, but it happens when you're in a dream, apparently. And the results were kind of interesting, that just closing your eyes didn't lead to an increase in alpha, but in 3 people, when they closed their eyes, they reported that now I'm not seeing anything. So if you close your eyes and don't see anything in a dream, then you get the increase in alpha, which reflects changes in occipital processing, visual cortex processing. Let me get to the one I promised before I think I jump ahead so we can conclude. But Karen ran this study as part of her dissertation to do the same study with puzzles that Kristen Sanders has done, except now in the lab and with puzzle cues during REM sleep. And she showed that the puzzle cues, again, biased dreams. So you're more likely to dream about the puzzle that we reactivated with a sound than you weren't. And we then wondered, okay, when you reactivate that memory, is it the dream that makes you more likely to solve it? Because it isn't necessarily that. It could be the unconscious processing, and that remains a contentious issue. But she did show that the dreamed of puzzles, if you were dreaming of the cued puzzles, those are more likely to be solved. So it seems like there's at least some link between dreaming and problem solving. Further investigation is probably needed. Okay, let's see. How close to the end am I? I think I finished 5 minutes, or am I over already? 5 minutes. 5 minutes, okay. So I'll skip this one. Daniel Morris worked on a study with virtual reality. People made sniff signals to show that they were re-experiencing the funny environment in the VR. That was pretty interesting. And then in collaboration with the monastic scholars, shown here again, putting EEG electrodes on one of the other scholars. There's a study I mentioned. They were meant to visualize Chenrezig, and one of our dreamers got the 3 beeps that went along with signaling I'm lucid now, and then got the word Chenrezig to try to visualize that, and they forgot to make the sniff signal, so we didn't get that, but we got the dream reports showing that it seems to be possible to do this visualization, and that leads into then the dream yoga work that Gabriella is leading. And in this case, these 6 people with extensive training contemplative practices were able to come to the lab. And so we're studying some people in North America, and the monastic scholars in India are recruiting people in India and Nepal to try to show how their practices can also be studied in this way. So that's ongoing and very exciting. We use this 2-way communication method. So someone would have a particular goal in their dream, and they would make the sniff signal as shown here when they were engaging in that practice, and then a 4 sniff when they had completed that practice. And so we could look at what was happening during sleep and try to understand how does that reflect this dream yoga process, and how can that change something about the person. So an ongoing study to try to understand that. But let me try to finish up here. So number of ways to enhance the benefits. Some are natural benefits of sleep, like memory and creativity, and some are ones that we can implement with effort, like lucid dreaming, which we're using in studies of people with nightmares, like in PTSD. Maybe reducing negative emotions is important. So here I think about, well, if you're activating memories overnight, which memories are you activated? Which ones do you want to reactivate? So what you think about during the day influences what your brain is doing during sleep. And that in turn goes back and influences your waking life. So if we're thinking about people with depression or anxiety or PTSD or any of us, we could ask, well, what are the qualities of the memories we're activating, and how is that influencing me when I wake up? And do we have opportunities to do better sleep hygiene? Sleep hygiene is a lot of ways to make your sleep better. And this aspect of thinking about the cognitive side of memory reactivation is going to be an important part of that, because we can use TMR to try to change what's going on in your mind. You have your conscious memory processing happening, which might be like mind wandering. And at the very same time, there's unconscious mind wandering that's not a single strand, but a whole bunch of strands going on. And that's how we think we're influencing that. And I have a recent paper where we wrote about the conscious and unconscious memory reactivation with Andrew Budson, who's a neurologist that has a particular theory of consciousness that we expanded on in this paper. No time for that, but it's pretty interesting to think about these dimensions. A lot of basic research and memory research covered conscious and unconscious memory, the difference between declarative memory and non-declarative memory, like skills and implicit memory and so forth. And now we can think about how do those types of memory map onto what happens during sleep. Our dreaming, a little piece of what's happening, all the unconscious processing that happens during sleep. As I was mentioning, we're using wearables, interesting types. We have some colleagues here studying the in-ear EEG ones. You can also measure from the forehead, and we're trying to use these devices to implement the TR method in the home, sometimes for a clinical application, also for allowing us to do studies longitudinally. We can see not just one nap, but over many nights, what effects can there be in people on memory and these other phenomena. So that's a good time to wind it up. I wanted to thank my many collaborators and students, and especially the members of ETSI Group 3. These are the monks and nuns who are studying dream yoga and working with us sometimes in Evanston, but also in the sleep lab they have at the Drepung Science Center, and also with mobile EEG. It's very exciting to see that work continue, and to see the monks and nuns then take that wherever they want to take it, and bringing Buddhism and science together in really fascinating ways. So I'll thank my funding agencies, and thank you for attention today. So we didn't have any questions, but now there's time.
Thank you. This is so many it's so fascinating. I've got like a whole list of questions. I'm just going to ask you one, but I was teaching this topic for my science of study freshman seminar, and there was a kid in the class who I asked them about somnambulance and sleep talking, and this made me wonder about this thalamic in-out switch. Do people who sleep talk or sleepwalk tend to have better memories or like access to? Are they better at this?
Yeah, I don't know. I think is that
looked
more
at-
of a sign of sleep not being totally right. You know, it's kind of a disconnect between the cognitive and the motor aspects. So, you know, it turns out that we have these classic sea chases of REM and non-REM and so forth that assume your brain is in a state, but some parts of the brain can be in one state and some parts of another. So this is kind of local sleep, like your motor system is woken up, but the rest of your brain hasn't, and it's not necessarily acting out a dream. It can be a non-REM, but I think I would appeal to my sleep doctors more to describe that. But I don't know of any studies showing better memory performance in those people, but maybe they didn't look.
Yeah. And then if I could ask one related question, which is, so our thalamus shuts down most of our body, but you said not the eyes. What would be the evolutionary reason to
as
keep
far
the
as motor
eyes going?
function?
Yeah.
So I think your eyes can move without it being a problem.
Yeah.
Why if you
from an
move your
evolutionary
arms and
point of
roll
view?
over, you're gonna, hit other people or wake up.
Yeah.
Or if you don't want to be acting out your dreams like in REM behavior disorder is happening. So not acting out your dreams is good, but your respiration's still going.
Right.
That's good. And your eyes can move all they want without causing any problems.
Yeah.
And little twitches aren't much of a problem. So I think it's adaptive to not move during sleep. And maybe it's adaptive to not remember your dreams. That's an interesting question, because some would argue that it's really helpful to know your dreams. But I think so many of our dreams aren't remembered. And maybe that's good in some sense, because you don't want to confuse, Stephan did something in my dream. I don't want to take it out on him because he didn't really do it.
Right.
So that would be good.
Great.
Yeah. You've got one there.
Hang on. Sorry.
Have you or your lab done any research as to why in these various parasomnias like RBD, dream content sort of becomes more violent? Because I've read about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that one for Alan? I think I would guess that the other dreams that aren't so violent don't get reported as much because it doesn't lead to a problem. So you might have an over-reporting of the violent one. I could be wrong about that, but that's my suspicion. Yeah.
You don't discount studies with meditation, not
They-
sleeping, but actually meditate.
Yeah. No, we haven't. There's an interesting literature growing on to what extent does daytime meditation change your sleep? Does it give you something that sleep doesn't? And there's some evidence that people who meditate a lot and are very skilled might sleep a bit less, but I think that's still a developing story. We've only looked at the advanced practitioners of dream yoga. So they also meditate during the day, but and in fact, they're different in so many ways. So if we're asking the question, what happens if you engage in these contemplative practice during sleep? It's hard to do it with the experts because just with any other practice, we don't know their whole lifetime of experiences. So if they're a wonderful, kind, compassionate person, we can't say that's because of the dream yoga. So we need to study other people and in a longitudinal study, look at what benefits does it get. So it's important to study the experts, but we can't ask every question with them. Yeah.
Thanks, Ken. Fascinating talk. I was wondering, in terms of the music and sound cues that you're using, you talked about the volume being important, but are there specific pitches or types of music that really lend itself to TMR? Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't had enough time to do all the studies, parametric studies you might want to do to figure that out. So we kind of take a stab at it with our sounds. I think we found that really abrupt sounds, alarm clock, a fire alarm, we don't use those. So staying away from some things like that. Maybe music that doesn't grab the attention might not be as good, but we haven't examined that systematically. because there's so many other questions driving us. But I think we have sounds that work, even spoken sounds. Like we're doing this study of sleep apnea, and the sound we present is different speakers saying, breathe in. And so even spoken words can get in. They need to be a little louder. If it's like a bunch of different words, they might just sound like mumbling if they're not loud about it. So the problem with speech, and so speech can work, but it maybe would have to be a little louder for the mind to be able to decipher the phonemes and really understand it. So we generally go with nonverbal. Yeah.
Thanks. That was really fascinating. I'm not sure this is actually working. Is it?
I think it's for the video
Yeah.
recording,
Oh, okay.
not for
Yeah,
everyone here.
It was really fascinating, and most of the examples you gave about the benefits had to do with kind of problem solving, but you also mentioned creative benefits that were associated with the associative properties of dreaming. And I wonder if you could talk about what kind of experiments you've done along those lines.
Yeah, you know, Bob Stickold, who's really important contributor and inspiration, did a study where he asked people to make relationships between words, and he found that when you wake people up, their associations are going to be more wide, more distant associations if they just woke up from REM sleep than other stages. So it looks like REM is a time where you can think more outside the box than at other times. So that's one aspect of creativity. The problem solving folks call that one aspect of creativity, but there are of course other ways to measure creativity that remain to be explored. How does you know, sleep give you more creative inspiration for your paintings or something? There's an artist in London who really seems to get a lot out of his lucid dreams from the creativity there. So I think actually here's another way to think about your question, which is, you know, some people in the world are more creative than others and they can tell great stories, and others of us not, you know, don't come up with this kind of stories and write books about them. But every one of us can create amazing dreams. So that creativity is there to come up with fantastic stories, and maybe we could all harness it a bit more. And as I said in the press release for that study of creative problem solving and dreams, I think I said something like, there are a lot of problems in the world these days that we need more creative solutions to, and so we should understand how that works better. So that's one reason to study that. But I think there's a lot more to do there that your question addresses. But how do we study creativity and sort of link it to what's happening during sleep?
Thank you, Dr. Paula. Absolutely fascinating about the lucid dream. I'm like so interested in that. My question is, you mentioned you can measure the participants when they're like closing eyed in the lucid dream, right? But did any participants like report maybe dreaming or imagining something inside their lucid dream while closing their eyes?
Yeah, some of them reported that when they closed their eyes, they were still seeing the dream environment. But is that but you mean imagining?
No, like while they were in their lucid dream and they close their eyes, will that be like a dream inside a dream, for example, like imagination or
Sometimes they
visual?
would switch to another environment. Um, Maybe what you're getting at is a little bit, how do you know whether we're imagining something or dreaming it? And that reminds me of a quote from one of the monastic scholars, Tabke. He was in the lab and participated in a study, and he didn't have a lucid dream that night, and he hadn't ever had a lucid dream. But like a week later, he had a lucid dream, and he came and told us, you know, either I had a lucid dream last night, or I dreamed that I had a lucid dream last night. How's that for a conundrum?
Thank you.
Oh, you got
Be
one
right
right
back.
there too.
Yep, I'm gonna.
Oh, in order. Okay.
Thanks for the great talk. I was really interested by the TMR for the motor skill learning in particular. I was wondering, do you get a sense of whether there would be a difference in using TMR for like motor skill learning, where it's like just using your digits or even arms, as opposed to like more whole body movements like dance? If there would be any differences there when you're recruiting more muscle groups?
Yeah, you're right. There's a literature on TMR during motor control, but it's usually just fingers and not, you know, whole body. we have a study of motor control where people had to control single muscles on their arm to cues, and we showed that we could make them better at the muscles that related to the cues we presented compared to the other ones. And the reason we did that study is because we started another study with a colleague of mine, Mark Slutsky, who studies stroke recovery. And so he was studying patients that have lost control of their arm and they can move only kind of grossly, and they need to learn how do they, put salt on and use a fork, and they can do rehab that lets them to individually control muscles. There's this motor synergy that's problematic, and they can overcome that with kind of a video game like training where they control single muscles and see a cursor on the screen and get better at it. And we asked, if we activate the memory for the rehab procedure, can we make the rehab more effective? And I'm waiting for Mark to finalize the results, but it looks like maybe it worked to enhance this a little bit more, not full body, but arm movements, specific muscles of arm movements. And so if that works, that'll open the door to other, think of any therapy, motor rehab after stroke or psychotherapy even. If you're learning something new, you want that learning to take hold, you could reactivate it during sleep and supplement the training with reactivation. Maybe you were thinking more about if you're learning some new dance moves, should you play the music during the night so you're better at the moves? I mean, I think there's, we had the Guitar Hero. I think if you're a musician learning something, like I know a musician in the San Francisco Philharmonic, and she learned some new piece. It pervades her whole day. She's listening to it, she's practicing it. I think it pervades her sleep too. But I guess if you're an amateur and you just spend a little time, maybe it would help to present that music to yourself overnight. And I guess, there's a limited amount of time overnight. So, and so we don't worry about that with the stroke patients. That's like really important. But other times you say, okay, if I reactivate some things, I'm not going to reactivate the others because maybe you can't do as many. I don't know, maybe there's no limit, but there could be a limit. And so I think it is interesting to study that. And we haven't studied, are there costs to TMR beyond just the benefits? Is there a cost for something else that you're not good at remembering? We don't have an answer to that, but we need to keep looking. Sometimes there's a cost, but sometimes you'd be willing to pay the price. Yeah. On dancing. Oh, on the stroke patients. Yeah, we're really close to finishing. I think there's just a few more patients to go.
Hi, my question would be, it's very simple. I'm like, how do you choose participants for your study?
Can you say it again?
How do you choose participants for your study? Because I was like, I don't dream that often.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
so it depends on the study. If it's an afternoon nap study, we choose undergraduate students that say they could fall asleep, and they've had a lot of practice falling asleep in front of lectures, so it's not so hard. And so not everyone fall asleep, but we try to make them not be too uptight about it. If we're doing a dream study, we wake people up right at the end of REM periods, and even you would have a dream if we woke you up at the right time and asked you the right question. And when you wake up, you have to not just get up and start your day, but give it a half a minute, and you find that sometimes the dream is there if you give it a chance. So people can improve their abilities. Dream yoga training in part starts with getting to recall dreams better, so you can get better at it. And for some experiments, we really want people that have already had a lot of lucid dreams. So we will survey people and find people with lucid dreaming experience. But we can train people who haven't had any lucid dream experience too. So that's also interesting. The guy that did the 8-6, he had never had a lucid dream before he came to our lab. So the TLR method seemed to work for him to help it happen. So I think we can. We're hopeful that we can make people have lucid dreams. But actually, I'm not much of a lucid dreamer myself. So probably I need more of that method too. And dream recall. It's hard if you're not in the habit. So a lot of this is sleep habits, and what are your habits right before sleep? Do you do doom scrolling? Because that stuff's going to pervade your sleep. And so the sleep hygiene recommendation is always have a calming nighttime routine. It could be meditation, or it could just be something calming that's going to lead to better sleep, because it's influencing, the chances that you just lay there awake, I guess, as well as the quality of your sleep when you are sleeping. So these are important things. We're very excited about studying those influences too. How can we? I think I like the term sleep engineering. So Can we do even more to sleep hygiene to enhance it more by engineering how sleep goes during the night? Can you progress through the stages better? Can you have fewer microarousals and remain asleep? Lots of territory there too for more people. I hope more people join the field. There's a lot more to do. Every psych department should have more people studying sleep. Why is that they don't? It's important. I hope you got that idea across.
Thank you very much. Join me in thanking her.